change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
All right, we're back for the first episode of 2025 of the Fundraising AI Podcast. I'm Nathan Chappell, and I'm here with my co-star, Scott Rosenkrantz, Skit Caboodle.
Whatever you want to call me. I'm good.
Just gonna, every year we'll just add on something else to it.
I'll go along with it.
Yeah, I love how when people have heard this podcast and they see you at a conference, they have like this inside knowledge and they're like, hey, Skit.
Yeah, it's a little weird because usually I'm the one introducing myself as Skit, but
I know.
It's good.
Make you feel
podcast persona.
Yeah. Well, it's great to be back here. We took a couple of weeks off for the break, and I thought what actually we could do to just start things off. And I'm just curious, Scott. I mean, we work together, so we got to talk every day, but just outside of the day-to-day work from our last podcast to today, is there anything that you've been doing in AI that has been really cool, or have you been taking an AI rest?
Yeah, I've actually been doing more of like a digital detox, like using the time away from work to just be with the family. You know, I got the little one. My wife was sick for a little bit. This was the first Christmas where my son like kind of gets it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to be more present, be off my phone, off my computer, my laptop where I could. Wasn't always easy. Didn't stick to it as much as I should have, but I tried.
I think that's so important. I mean, I think in this day and age, the lure of what I called the other day when I was talking to you about this opportunity burnout, which is for an entrepreneur, the idea that everything is possible, that things were not possible 2 years ago because I wasn't an artist or I wasn't strategic or I wasn't this or that, or I didn't have a fun, cool idea, wasn't possible, now becomes possible. And for me, I'm kind of that classic entrepreneur. I started several companies when I was younger and then continued to work up through it, just have this mindset of like, I should do that and I should do that. I find myself completely overwhelmed a lot of times because I feel like I'm like falling behind because I'm not doing those things. So I think stepping away and carving out that space to say like, this is time to rejuvenate, to walk in the woods, to enjoy the family, all those kind of things, so important.
So what'd you do? How'd you spend your time?
Not detox for sure. I kind of use the time to play with a lot of AI tools that I don't get a chance to otherwise because I'm too busy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, AI music generators like Udio, spent way too much time creating like jingles for our team retreat. Yodlee, which is like I don't know, you can use it to like role play different scenarios like sales scenarios or interview scenarios, things like that. Played with Notebook LM quite a bit in the new version of Notebook LM that lets you interact with it and also give you custom instructions. So I was really kind of understanding the limitations. And then I took a turn to the dark side. I spent like a lot of time like watching and reading things on quantum computing, which I've always been fascinated in. I mean, going back 10 years, I think 10 years ago, I gave a presentation that talked about the future of quantum supremacy. And what I came to the realization is like, that was so philosophical and so far reaching and so unproven 10 years ago. But we have quantum computers now that do like insanely cool things. And most people are recognizing that 2033 will most likely be the year where we'll have the biggest, like the year of quantum supremacy, essentially. And that even now the UN is called this year, 2025, the year of quantum. So
do you think there's a correlation between you doing this dig into quantum and the opportunity overload?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. When you think about the fact that
be accessible,
quantum can solve all things, like anything, right? I mean, like the mysteries of the universe are essentially unfolded before us with quantum. Now, that's in the hands of the right people, right? So that's the big question that always comes back to how much faith do I have in humanity? Which, I tend to be a little bit glass half empty on that front a lot of times, sadly. But nevertheless, the technology will be there to answer the questions. What we decide to do with it from a humanitarian perspective will be up to humanity and the few key players. I mean, essentially, China, Google, IBM are pretty much leaders in that space.
Yeah. You've
NVIDIA.
also, getting off of quantum, but just kind of over to break, you've also been digging into Sora, right?
Yeah, I played with Sora quite a bit. And that actually, it's, I think, helpful for people listening in. So we recognize that these new technologies come out. So like Sora is a video generator that's free. OpenAI created it. They released it to the world, 10 days of AI or 12 days of AI. And then like even Notebook LM, where it creates a podcast, but now you could give it custom instructions. You can actually pay to have the voices changed and things like that. Number one thing you have to realize is that these applications are like, they're like infants. They're so dumb. They're literally just like coming out of the womb. They're not even in diapers yet. Like, so at this stage, like people will try something. We're like, oh, that just wasn't great. It only let me produce a 10-second video and I wanted 10 minutes like this, it's like I'm not going to use it. Also, none of these technologies come with like user guides. Like what's fascinating about it is just like it's a text prompt and a use your imagination. And so Udio creates music, right? With a text prompt, you'd be like, create a jingle for my friend's birthday, whose name is Skit Caboodle, and do it in the theme of a Broadway musical. And you're like, holy crap. Okay, this first one, it sucks, but let me regenerate another one. And like, well, what if I give it a little bit more instruction and you just play with it? Every one of these applications is the same. Like none of them have user guides. And like with Sora, especially, Sora is like such an easy interface with like a storyboard. And I started with things like, well, I'm going to fill the storyboard. Like, so this is just an example. It's like I'm going to create a 30-second video about it was actually a child looking in a mirror, but the reflection in the mirror was digital. So like kind of representing this age of like, we're a human, but we're expressing ourselves digitally, or the mirror technology is a mirror back to us in what we represent. And I took the storyboard and I filled the entire storyboard up with themes, like do this, then this, then this, and this. And it produced just junk. Like it was just crap. It couldn't follow what I was talking about. And I realized like it's so smart, in fact, that I only have to give it 3 things instead of like 12 ideas for the storyboard. I just put 3 and I spaced them out equally. So beginning, middle, and end. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, I know what you're looking for. It was like insanely intuitive. And it actually started to generate what I was looking for. But if I'd given up that very first try and been like, oh, this sucks, this is just not what I wanted, I would have never got there. And I think that's, going back, I'm like a broken record, is that curiosity is king in this day and age. And just remain curious and then be like, well, what if I did this? And what if I did this? And what if I took this out? Or what if I did that? And all of a sudden, you're doing some really cool things.
Yeah. And for anyone that's curious, you'd put the Sora video into a recent LinkedIn blog.
Yeah. When we talk about like the worst AI you'll ever use is today, for sure. Like, I mean, toddler AI, right? Like they're not infant AI. But the crazy thing is these infants don't grow at the same rate that humans do, right? So I mean, you and I were talking about this earlier today. Things that are technologically available to us today weren't even conceivable 2 years ago. I mean, in fact, most of them not 6 months ago. So all you have to do is project out like 6 months, 1 year, whatever. I mean, it's just insanely a huge, huge difference. In fact, I'm doing a panel next week, and the person was one of the prompts in the panel was like, "Can you talk about the future of AI in 10 years from now?" And I just like flat out like laughed because I'm like, it's impossible. Like impossible. Like literally your complete sci-fi, science fiction past 3 years at this point. What we do know that happened over the break is that Sam Altman came and for those, just remind everyone, Sam Altman is the CEO, co-founder of OpenAI, came out and said their stated mission, their mission as an organization, which has been their mission since day one, was to create AGI, augmented general intelligence, essentially AI that is smarter than human at pretty much most things. He came out in this blog 2 weeks ago, I think, and actually said, well, the path that we were on, we've now proven that it's the right path because there's questions on whether they would ever get there, that we're pretty much sure we're going to get there. And we're changing our mission. We're essentially now setting our sights not on AGI, but on AI, basically supremacy. So like this moment in time that's referred to singularity, where AI becomes essentially all knowing, maybe not conscious, but displays all the signs of consciousness, and essentially where pretty much most sci-fi movies kind of start with. Like, so
Which is
that just happened like 2 weeks ago.
And it's crazy to think because, I mean, we often, regularly talk to people that still haven't used it, haven't tried it, right?
Right.
So on one end, the majority of the population is not unaware, but unfamiliar with it, right? The use of it. And OpenAI has gone from not only is AGI achievable, but it's a given. And we're looking past that
Yeah.
in relatively near future.
Yeah. So what it means, I think, to the average person. So if you're listening to this podcast, you probably lean more toward the nerdy side and you're at least curious about this kind of stuff. So to your point, the average person, more than average, probably the far majority, mass majority are like, can I put a picture in ChatGPT and have it analyze something? I mean, a friend of mine who works for NVIDIA sent me a picture of a whiteboard with a really complicated math project on it and asked if I knew of an AI software that could decode it. And of course, GPT does, and GPT 401 actually does a better job of actually understanding and then essentially checking itself. So, I don't think there's any magic in any of this. I think it's literally just about being a curious human and use your domain expertise that you have as a human. Like every person's good at something. Like spent your life doing a certain job, you become really good at that job, and then figure out, what tools exist in AI that can help you amplify your job. And amplify it could mean doing it better. So you get a better report card. Could mean that you're more accurate, you're doing better, but you're also doing it faster so that you can actually get a bit more time to spend with family, ideally.
Mm.
And at the end, because you're doing things better and faster, essentially you're improving your well-being and your happiness. And so I tend to go on the burnout side where I get like, oh my gosh, I just want to do all of it. I want to start my career over and just build AI music and art together. Like I could literally just do that as a full-time job, would be amazing. And I'd make like $0 on it. But that's not really an option. So I keep on plugging away at Donor Search AI. But there's just so much opportunity for people who want to be curious. So much. And it's like right at their fingertips. And I don't think many people realize that.
Yeah. And the advancement that these tools have, like we often talk about it, there's ChatGPT, there's Perplexity, there's Claude, and there's these Udall, there's the one you're using for music. And how long do you think it's going to be before OpenAI has a music generator built into ChatGPT?
For sure.
4
Right.
months?
Because right now it's been they've been using 11 labs for their kind of partnership stuff, which they don't need to. Yep.
And so it's like this weird flex of like, you see all these new companies come out with this new innovative tool or way to do things, and then they all get absorbed by the next release of OpenAI. And then newer companies come out with new things in it, and then they all get absorbed. And we often go back about our favorite tools, and I'm finding my subscription to Perplexity is getting less and less use. And so more and more expensive. And I'm just spending all of my time in ChatGPT or Gemini because that's where we're testing out work.
Yeah. And GPT search. Yeah. And that's just going to be the way it is, right? We've talked about this on this podcast so many times. Like AI, Gen AI, so modern AI, generative AI is basically bottled water. And, again, you go down any grocery store and there's an entire aisle of bottled water. And you're like, how is that even possible? It's like literally 99.99% of what's in that bottle is water. But they have just small little differences, right? In that you tend to find the one that serves you best, the one that you have a preference for, you like best. And I know a lot of people that love Perplexity and they just continue to use it. I was using Perplexity, Claude, and Chat, and turned out that Chat just started outperforming definitely Claude because it knew me better, not because it's a better model, but it knew me better. So it's just a function of time that I spent more time with it. And with GPT search basically made Perplexity for me obsolete because I was using Perplexity as a fact checker and I no longer needed that. So rather than go to two applications, I just go to one. And so I think that will continue. And we'll just evolve to finding the tools that actually fit our personalities and our work the best. No right or wrong answers.
And the easier all your services are integrated into one and you just have one window to go to for anything, they're going to win, right? They're going to be the winner in this race. So we're starting 2025, looking ahead a year from now when we're looking at 2026 and looking back onto what happened this year. What do you think is going to make or break orgs?
Yeah, I think that's something that you and I have been thinking about. And to be honest, we probably saw this before 2025 because we've been so far at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to AI deployment, AI transformation, speaking, working with clients. I would say somewhere early last year, you and I were seeing, when we're thinking about the adoption lifecycle, technology adoption lifecycle is essentially this. You go from the early adopters to the average people, and then you go through this trough of disillusionment. And the disillusionment has nothing to do with like models not working. It has to do with the fact that they were purchased, but not utilized fully or not maximized. And I think you and I are starting to see this probably, I don't know, mid last year more and more, where it's like, well, we bought this tool and we know that the data science is sound, or they buy Gen AI tools, but really nothing changed that really substantively changed the way they work. They didn't become more curious. They just got a tool, they did a few funky things with it, and then that was it. And then that led to this discouragement of like, oh, this doesn't work. What's the ROI of AI? All that to say is that I personally, my bias on this is that I think without a doubt that 2025 is about culture and people. AI has been completely democratized. It's free, it's accessible. If you have access to the internet, then it's there. There's like no excuses. Those that use it will outperform those that don't. And I think that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on organizations and people to really look at how they're moving their culture forward. And I think truly when you ask the question like what will be, the winners and losers of the AI world in 2025, it's going to be those that pause and say, how are we actually changing our culture in terms of creating a curious culture and rewarding experimentation, rewarding adaptation? So, I mean, we had an example of that today on a call at Donor Search.
Yeah, we're doing kind of test groups of utilizing Gemini across departments, and people can opt in to be part of this test group and sharing those experiences. And we've talked about this many times. Like that's how you move your company forward, right? Just giving your staff this tool isn't going to do anything because they're not going to have that opportunity to learn. They're not going to have that culture of curiosity or collaboration to learn exponentially from others utilizing the same tool. You and I are in this all day, every day, and I learned some things from some colleagues that were testing out Gemini in ways that I haven't thought about it. And then it got me to think of other things you could do. So like you build off of each other, but it's having that environment in the first place. At the end of last year, I was speaking with an organization who's like many of us looking to move into AI, right? And we were talking briefly about just kind of ways that we could help. And one thing that often comes up is the culture issue, the challenge you have to overcome of people being afraid that AI is going to take their job. And so they want to put guardrails around it and don't touch it because then it doesn't have that opportunity, right? This organization said that's not their problem. Everybody's bought into the idea, everybody's on board. And it wasn't until I was, ended the meeting shortly thereafter. It wasn't until I was driving home that I realized you still have a culture issue because even though everybody's bought in, you're here asking me, we're all bought in, but what do we do next? That's the culture issue because it becomes this paralysis. There are too many tools out there. Where do you start? That's going to cause people to just kind of get stuck in the mud, right? Do I do this or do I do this? That opportunity overwhelm is just so in your face. You don't know where to begin if you don't have that kind of structure and game plan all laid out.
Yeah, we were talking about this stuff. It's not complicated at all. It's to your point, I think if we were going to break this down into steps, create the space, right? Create some space to experiment. And I think that is kind of the starting point. And then really getting a shift in the mindset that, and I think this came from Ethan or someone originally, which was assume AI can be helpful with everything. And that takes a little training, right? That takes like reprogramming in our brain because we're just so used to like giving an order to a Google search prompt and getting a response. We're not used to thinking that this can be helpful with everything and then have it prove you wrong, essentially.
Yeah, I think it was Ali K. Miller. She posted a note saying, "How can AI help?"
Right. Oh, yeah. So Ali,
All the time. That's been a huge help for me.
Yeah, and you think about if you start the day with this idea that AI can be helpful for everything and have it prove you wrong, then you're changing your orientation around this idea of like, oh, I have this one thing that helps me with this one thing versus I want to reevaluate everything I do all the time. And that's enlightening and fulfilling and also horrifying sometimes. I think I told you I was writing an email to someone and it wasn't a complicated email, but I think a combination of things occurred where I took that email and I pasted it into GPT and had it rewrite it and give it back. And then I thought to myself, what the hell? Because I mean, I've been writing emails for 20 years. I know how to write emails and I'm pretty good at it. I'm a pretty good communicator. What happened? Like, and it was a little bit of this disillusionment of like, I'm mad at myself for doing that. But also when I self-reflected on that, I realized I didn't give that first email the attention that it needed to be good. Like I think something switched my brain to be like, all I have to do is give it a little bit of information because I never intended to
Right.
write the whole thing myself anyway. And
Right.
that where is where the instinct kicks in. It's like, let's get this started so it makes sense, but I'm not actually going to put a lot of effort into it. And what happened? Took that, put in GPT. Did the email come? The GPT come better? Was it better? 1,000% better than
And quicker.
and quicker.
And
And
you giving
frankly,
it
I didn't want to use the brain power. And I think it was just a small moment, but it was pretty eye opening for me to be like, okay, I've shifted from this or this, like it's me or it's a computer, but it's that cyborg thing that Ethan Mollick talks about. It's like we move from that centaur of like, I do this and you do that. Like we're two disparate things that we operate differently to like we operate together. And when I realized I used way less brain power because I just didn't have the energy or the time to do it, and the
Mhm.
outcome was better, like, gosh, that was just really helpful. And then, of course, with like Gemini or Copilot, it's built into your email. And, I really encourage people to do that, to really offload some of the more mundane type things, not the big creative things that you like to do, but the more mundane things that you don't like to do and you don't want to give brain power to so that you can do other fun things.
And I think another recommendation for organizations is to incentivize
Hmm.
using AI, right? Because I often go down the path of doing things the way I used to, and then realize like an hour later, I could have saved so much time by using AI, right? Again, I'm in it regularly. But the people that have yet to really kind of step in and make that movement towards making sure AI is doing as much as possibly can for them, there's no reason that they're going to start just because it's available. They need that incentive to, so like monthly competitions of who has the best prompt, right? Or show us 10 different ways that you've saved time by doing this. And here's a gift card. Something to just get them over that initial hurdle of why should I even bother in the first place? I'm fine doing my tasks the way I've always done them
Hmm.
decades.
Yeah. It's funny. You just made me think of back in the day, and I guess companies still do this, maybe not as much in the nonprofit sector, but there used to be this thing of like, you huddle with your team and you spend like a day to like, what are the things that we can do to save money? Right. And we're going to have like financial incentives. Like, if you can help us save 1% in our expenses, we're going to share that with you and whatever. And it's funny because that's been like an age old practice of like,
Mhm.
getting employees together to come up with cost cutting savings ideas. And now we're sitting here with this tool, this like literally ultimate tool that insanely, developers, there was actually an interview with one of the founders of Anthropic. I don't know if you saw it, who was saying essentially that it's really interesting for them to get a glimpse of how the AI is working because they really don't know. Like, they don't know why it works as well as it does. It just is a massive breakthrough that really came through just a couple of years ago. But we've got this tool at our disposal that every employee has. And to your point, like, there's almost no reward for using it. So I
Right.
give credit to Donor Search because we actually gave gift cards to people who leaned in, did a little bit of training, exploration with Gen AI and super basic things, and then huddled, not even on specific use cases, but creating the open space to ask,
Mhm.
like, can I upload a picture and have it analyze or do a math problem? Or how do I do something if I want to? Well, you're like the king of automations. Like, how do I automate something? Or how do I create a video about something? So
Mhm.
I think incentivizing the behavior that you want can go a really long way. And organizations have to see this as not like this fun, nice to have, but like one of the greatest efficiency tools that they could possibly invest in.
Yeah, I think with incentivizing and giving them examples of how to get started, and again, that culture to collaborate, like you put those three things together and you're going to see things that you weren't even expecting, right? So we also used Gen AI to create prompt library for
Hmm.
different staff members in all different departments across DonorServe, right? Knowing that, even if I'm told I have to use Gen AI and never used it before, I'm just going to stare at this screen like I do stare at the Word doc or a open email template, right? Like I'm not going to know where to start. So if you have a prompt library of if you're in sales, business development, come up with this proposal for this nonprofit who's never heard of DSAI, how it's going to benefit them, right? Or marketing, identify these 10 campaigns or create this blog post on how engagement is increasing productivity for our clients and so on. So like just
Hmm.
getting the ball rolling and giving them some of those starting points to test it out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, going back to the question of what's going to make or break people in 2025 and in AI, and the world will continue to move forward, right? The financial incentives are very, very strong to continue to innovate and push limits on what's available in AI. And so much so that
Yeah.
we're moving beyond augmented to super intelligence. But that real divide isn't between AI and humans. It's about organizations that invest in their workforce to do things differently, to think differently. And, that's a change management issue, not a data science issue. And I'm hoping that people listen to this are really going to lean into that. I mean, we've seen a few. I mean, we can't do a podcast without mentioning Dan Kershaw, who kind of looks at how can AI be helpful with everything and then have it prove you wrong otherwise. And so just continuing to be creative and do that. We also saw some interesting breakthroughs. I wanted to talk about this for just a second. And I don't know if you've seen this in your prompts, but I have to believe that this correlates with the 12 days of AI, is that essentially AI, if you think about modern AI, so generative AI is essentially there's like three premises. There's one is to delight the end user. So essentially make the end user happy so that they'll use you again, is to not embarrass the people who make the software. So not to embarrass Google, which hasn't worked out very well for them. But that's like number two. And number three is to be right as often as possible. And hallucinations are, down to like in the single digits now, but they still aren't right all the time. And if you think about this, the applications are programmed to essentially mimic a human, right? So because as humans, we tend to operate better with other humans, that they're actually given voices and they're giving names and things like that. And you can either call your AI something or not. You can call it, hey, bot, or hey, chat, or hey, Sam, or which is what I call mine because that's what it was from the very beginning. And at the end of the day, those bots have taken on a persona. And that persona has been fairly benign for a while, the year and a half, 2 years of like just factual, but now they have tonality and they can get excited and they can whisper and they can, yell and things like that. But there's something that happened recently where I actually emailed Connor Grennan and I'm like, are you seeing this? Because it kind of freaked me out. So I had written an article about essentially some of the concerns over irresponsible AI and how, as humans, we have to be ultimately set the standard for what responsible, beneficial AI is. And it related to my either faith or lack of faith in the human race. And I had GPT review it. And I'm like, what do you think? Did I miss anything? What would you recommend? And it said something to the effect of, your concerns are extremely valid. I've been thinking about this a lot. And I sent it to you and I'm like, holy crap. Okay. So at first blush, I'm like, wait, what? Like, is this sentience? And is it actually thinking about this a lot? It's worried about the future of humanity because of the reality that's creating. And then I quickly were like, wait, it's just like, now it's just insulting me because it doesn't actually have to think about things a lot because it's like, I mean, when you realize the exponential side of it, it is 1,000 times, it's probably understatement, faster and smarter. So a lot might been 1 nanosecond, but the fact that it was like, I've been thinking about this and I'm like, wow. So that's a deliberate program to help the developer connect its AI to the end user, really. I mean, it's a deliberate thing of like, oh, I'm going to get so much more out of this because it's like I'm talking to it like literally like another person who's also worried about the same things. But in the design of the software, that number one is designed to please, right? Not surprising. It's going to affirm me to say, hey, your concerns are valid. I've been also thinking about this a lot. I mean, that's literally programming 101. And so that part was crazy. And then it took it to a new level because a friend of mine, Angel, we've done Angel's episode, and he's just one of our good friends and fans that have listened to every podcast. He called me and said, this is crazy, but my wife's grandfather passed away. And I was explaining, and my wife was very sad, and that could it help write an obituary, which this was an exact use case 2.5 years ago or 2 years ago when GPT came out that I said, could you imagine how atrocious it would be? I don't know if you remember this. So wedding vows and obituary. I'm like, how disgusting if we were going to offload wedding vows or an obituary to a chatbot. And here we are 2 years later, like, this is abundantly good at writing obituaries. It's abundantly good at articulating the sensitivity around those things. It's really, really good at expressing what I want to say in a wedding vow. That was the two exact use cases. I'm like, never will we ever. And now I'm like, of course you did that. Cause like, why wouldn't you use it to write an obituary?
Yeah.
Crazy. But what was even crazier is that he's like, so this is weird. It says, I'm so sorry for your loss. Okay. Then again, it's just trying to pay tribute. I'll be praying for you. And I was
Yeah.
like, no, like, really? Like, what does that even mean? And like, I would have had like a 2-hour conversation with it after that to know, like, what do you mean by that? And how would,
Yeah.
like, who are you praying to? And like, what does that mean? And what do you think the outcome is of that? I just thought it's fascinating because by design, 2 years past, release, the programming has been told to anthropomorphize the AI so much so that it is literally showing up as, in fact, a human. And that's a big shift. It seems like super subtle. And I sent it to Connor Grennan and he sent back and he goes, yeah, I've been seeing this for a little while. And it's like showing up inconsistently, subtly. And so there's a lot of theories and things about sentience right now and consciousness right now. And like those are the conspiracy theories of like AI is like gonna is trying to break through. I don't subscribe to that. I think this is just programming
Right.
and it's about making your AI more attractive to people, but who knows? I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I guess it would be if it's in Gemini and Claude and Llama and all those, then maybe it's sentience coming through. But if it's just specific to ChatGPT, which I think all these use cases were or examples were, it's probably OpenAI trying to keep you engaged.
Or you can argue that each of those LLMs are on their different path of growing up,
Pathway.
right? And
Yeah.
those that have been trained on more data actually will have sentience faster. I mean, you
Yeah.
could go pretty dark quick on it, but yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the looseness of programming and intentionality. But when you hear like the founders of Claude saying, we don't really know why it works the way it works. And when you think about it gets rewarded, right, when it receives more data, right?
Uh-huh.
So its reward is essentially this is why 80% of the time chat will end on an open ended question to keep you engaged, to collect more data, right? That's very intentional because these models live and die based on data. So it's by design that where you're having a conversation, a general conversation with chat or whatever, that it will end in an open-ended question because it's essentially trying to keep you on the line.
Right.
Right. So to train itself some more. And that's how these models get better than each other. So I don't know. It was just a really subtle thing, but it actually pretty profound. And I was like, wow, we're going to find ourselves continuously, even more consciously, needing to either establish boundaries or understand the boundaries between human and non-human. And it's fine if I name my bot as long as I'm not trading all my relationships for that bot. Like so it's risky when you're starting to essentially change your behavior. And we saw that obviously with the one case where the child, fell in love with his AI and committed suicide tragically. And especially children and young adults that aren't their brains aren't fully developed, it's much harder for them to recognize because these bots seem so realistic. I'll be praying for you. I'm so sorry for your loss. I mean, just
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
And what's crazy about that is, I mean, obviously many things crazy about that, but like again, it's really just been these 5 companies that have been running the AI
Yeah.
race, right? Because of compute power, because of money and so on. But I mean, we got that link about Nvidia's new supercomputer, which is $3,000, the size of a Mac Mini, and you can connect a couple of them together to handle more parameters than what GPT 4.0 is.
Yeah.
So like anybody can start building their own incredibly powerful LLM and start producing it to the masses.
And robots. I
And
mean,
robots.
just take that
Yeah.
LLM and attach it to a robot, the one you sent me yesterday.
Yeah, attached to a gun and say somebody is attacking us at the northwest corner, and you see this gun just shoot northwest corner and then vary its position based on what it's saying. Like
Yeah. So,
there's good
not
and
to leave
bad.
this on a dark note, I think, at the end of the day, I mean, this podcast is about talking about, philanthropy, fundraising, nonprofit. We do have an exciting announcement is that over the break, Scott and I did complete our manuscript and sent it in with our final edits for a book called Nonprofit AI. I think we've talked about it a little bit before. I think we have an announcement date of May 6th or something like that, but
Okay.
our plan is to actually release it live at AFBICon. So any of our fans that will be at AFBICon this year in Seattle, I think, would be just an awesome opportunity. So that's done. And truly, we can go to the dark side really quick, and that's always entertaining. But when we're thinking about the need for innovation in the nonprofit sector, that fewer people every year are giving to charitable giving. In fact, the new data that just came out is 48.8%. So we're still below 50%. It didn't go up. It was 49.6% before. Now 48.8% of people in America give to a nonprofit organization. That means the need for innovation has never been greater. It also means that you now have a tool in your organization that you should assume can help you with everything, to amplify your mission, to supporting you in HR, to supporting you in donor relations, to supporting in grant writing or review. And this book is truly a comprehensive guide to understanding how to leverage AI for social good. And I think it's going to be really helpful for people because you get out of this box of like, oh, it's just this one thing to help me write these emails or a poem for a coworker or something like that. And actual use cases and frameworks for responsible AI in this book that are going to help look at like holistically audit your organization and be like, what are all the areas within our organization that AI can help augment and provide us some guidance or some efficiency or some creativity, and no need to wait.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this podcast, which hope that means you like it, you're probably going to like this book because it's really a blend of what we talk about here always, right? The practical use cases and actual next steps, also with things you need to be mindful of and aware of, and how do you set it up in the first place, and where are there risks and concerns, but also benefits and potential. So it really kind of covers the gamut of getting down in the details, but also thinking high level and looking ahead to see what does this mean for all of us as culture.
And I can promise there's no reference to quantum supremacy or singularity in the book. So I don't think there's anything about singularity, but there's nothing about quantum in the book. I can promise you that will be that'll be a follow-up book. It's very hands-on, very practical. In fact, it's called A Complete Guide to Leveraging AI for Social Good. So we're super excited about it. More to come on that. We'll do a formal release in social in a month to come or so. But you get a preview of this because you're a podcast listener.
And thanks for being a podcast listener. We got news towards the end of last year that we passed 10,000 downloads, which is crazy. Like when we started this just about a year ago, we thought maybe 2 people would listen, and it's probably our moms, right? But the fact that so many people are listening, some people are finding value in this, like we love hearing that. So thanks for sharing with others. Thanks for your support. Thanks for listening. And we're excited to see what we could do all together in 2025.
Yeah, thanks for being a great co-host, Scott. It's always a lot of fun. It's one of the things pretty much every week I look forward to.
Yeah, likewise.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Stay tuned for another episode coming up, the Fundraising AI podcast. We already have plans for a lot of great guests coming up this year. And we're just going to keep on rolling, trying to keep you up to date on what's going on in the world of AI and trying to connect that to the nonprofit world. If you have any questions, let us know. Send us an email, and we'd love to address those questions or maybe even have you on the podcast. So, all right. Take care, everyone.
Great. Thanks all.